Okay, hey everybody. The following demo is going to be about combining images and will be of use to you in our upcoming project on our class vacation. So what I'm going to show you is a little bit about searching for that background image and how to combine successfully or convincingly the photograph of yourself, a photograph of one of your classmates, and a background photograph. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Okay, so here you see I'm in Photoshop, and this is a photograph that I had a friend take of me earlier today, especially for this demo. Some things that I want you to notice are that I had the photograph taken on a cloudy afternoon. I took the photograph, or I had the photograph taken around 1 p.m. And I also instructed my friend to put me on the side of the frame here, because when you're on vacation, oftentimes you want in the photograph yourself, and you want to be able to see whatever's in the background. Well, this is not a great vacation photograph, but that's okay because we're going to switch the background out. I'm going to place myself into something more exciting. Now, as I was thinking about doing this, I looked back through some of my old vacation photographs thinking, well, maybe that would be fun to kind of spice some of those up. I do want you to, if you're able to take a photograph, especially for this project. If you're not able to, just hit me up, let me know. But I came across this photograph of my mom and my sister, and we're in San Francisco here, which is where my mom lived for a long time. And I was really excited about this one. But then I realized that this photograph would actually be fairly problematic. One, it doesn't show the times, as I mentioned in our assignment handout. They're not wearing masks. This was pre-COVID. Also, the lighting is really high key, so it's very high contrast. It was very bright and sunny. And then the angle that the photograph is taken, they're sitting down and I'm looking down at them as I take the photograph. So finding a background image to work with this image was going to be really difficult. So don't make things hard on yourself. Or if you're up for that challenge, maybe do a few that are a bit easier before you jump into doing something like this, okay? So I thought about it and then I decided, no, that's no good. Better go get an actual, photograph that I am taking with the intention of combining it into something new. Something I mentioned was that I took the photograph on a gray day. It was also at about 1 p.m. And this project is somewhat deceivingly difficult because of things like that. Things like light, the temperature of the light, the time of day, the time of year. And then also, as I was mentioning with that image of my mom and my sister, the angle from which the photograph was taken. Now, after I had this photograph taken, I then went to Google to find a background image. And let's say that we've decided that we're going to Paris. If you just do a regular search, an image search for Paris, you're going to get a lot of images of the Eiffel Tower. And that's totally cool. It is a really iconic symbol of Paris. But there are some other things in Paris. You could do a little research, or maybe you've been there. I decided to do a search for the Louvre. And because my original photograph was taken on a gray day, I made my search even more specific and typed in gray day. Okay. Now, something else that I want you to make sure to do is I want you to click on Tools, and I want you to set your image search on large images. That's going to help in combining the photographs from your iPhone or your DSLR or whatever. It'll help with that combining. And from here, then I just started searching for an image that I felt would match the angle of the photograph of me and that would match my t-shirt wearing self. So like this one, it looks like it's raining, so that wasn't gonna work. Something that you also wanna make sure to look for is if you click on an image and you go to that website, why did I do this? Oh, here we go, okay. This website, I believe, is not a US website. And when I go to try to save this image, I discovered that in fact it is not a JPEG, it's a Google WebP. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't even know what that is. So let's just avoid that situation. If you discover that when you try to save an image and it's showing up as anything other than a JPEG, just move on. It's gonna make your life a lot easier if you just stick with a JPEG, okay? I'm gonna close this website because it seems to be thinking a lot. Now coming back over here, I downloaded a few different background images. First, I thought I might use this one. And then I grabbed, oops, sneak peek. Then I grabbed this one and I thought, all right, this one, I think this one will work. So now to work on combining the images. The first thing that I want you to do, just like we did with the texture project, is I want you to double check and possibly change the size and resolution of each of your files. Okay, so I'm going to go to image and image size. And you'll see that most likely anything you took from the web is going to be 72 pixels per inch because that is screen resolution. We want it to be 300 pixels per inch so that if you wanted to, you could take this to CVS or Walmart or something and you could get a 4x6 print made and put it in your photo album. So I'm going to, remember, I'm going to uncheck this in order to link my width, my height, and my resolution. And I'm going to change the resolution to 300. I'm satisfied. I'm going to say okay. I'm going to come back over here to the portrait of me and I'm going to do the same thing. Image size. And again, because it came from my phone, it's at a resolution of 72. So again, making sure that all three of these are linked. I'm going to change that to 300. And you may have noticed the physical dimensions on that other image, my background image, were something like 13 by 10. I want to bring these two photographs a little bit closer in physical dimension as well. I'm not going to up the size of this one. I'm going to downsize the other one. It's generally not a good idea to enlarge an image because as soon as you start enlarging an image, the computer has to make up information. So here, I'm just going to go back into image size and I'm going to bring this back down to, oops, now see what happened there? You don't want that. When you're changing the physical dimensions, make sure that only these two are linked. So I'm going to make this 6 inches wide. It's going to automatically change the height for me. And I'm going to say, okay. Now I can hardly see it, so I'm going to zoom in. And now we can get to the fun stuff. Back to the image of myself. my task here is to make a selection around myself. And like with the texture project, there are a number of different ways to do this. We're going to go ahead and try starting with the quick selection tool here. This is one that automatically recognizes the difference in colors between pixels. And if I click and drag, it does a fairly good job of selecting. Well, it's not doing a great job. Okay, it did a great job on my pants. I'm not too worried about this extra stuff because I can take care of it later. If you want to, you can play around with, up here, there's a minus. So you can come in here and you can try and push those marching ants up against what it is that you're trying to select. And that's not too bad. But I lost part of my head here, so now I've got to go back to the plus. Sorry, I had to check on something. Okay, so as I was saying, I can go back to the plus and I can add in that section that, that it accidentally cut off of my head. The other selection tools, you could, under here, you could try the magic wand tool, play with those, see what happens. You can also try the lasso tool. The lasso tool lets you freehand draw marching ants. When I learned Photoshop, this was the only way to make a selection. So I did a lot of practicing with a mouse, not even a trackpad, trying to make selections using that lasso tool. Feel free to try it out and see if you like it. Now that I've got my marching ants, I'm going to do something very familiar. I'm going to copy and paste it. So copy, and then I'll come back over to my Louvre image and I'm going to paste. Now, obviously, this is not the right positioning. So I'm going to get my move tool, and I recommend putting yourself or your classmate in about the same place that you are in the original photograph. So here I am over on the side. My head is above the center line. So I'm going to come over here. I need to move over a little bit and down. And that's really not too bad. I'm going to go ahead and clean up some of the excess stuff. To do that, I'm going to zoom in. So I don't need these little bits of tree. I'm going to use the eraser tool. Make sure that you're on the layer that you want to do the erasing in. So in layer 1, and I'm gonna make my brush a little bit smaller. And I'm also going to set the hardness at about 83%. Well, I meant to say around 80%. This is gonna just help match the edges. It's just an effective percentage I've found. So I'm gonna come in and I'm just gonna start cleaning up some of those excess background bits from the other photograph. This can be a little bit tricky if you've got like a lot of wispies happening, but you can get that brush really tiny, or you can slick your hair back and then you don't have to worry about doing this, although you might have to worry about it on your classmates. So don't be afraid. Make that brush really tiny, get in all those wispies. because again, that also adds to the effectiveness of the project. I also accidentally brought in all this extra information under my arm. I need to get rid of. And here, when I get into the nook of my arm, I'm going to need to get a smaller brush. And there's a little green halo here that I'm going to also erase. That's just a little bit more grass that we don't need. And then I'm going to zoom out and take a peek. Something that I noticed between the two images is that the background looks a little bit crisper. And I want to add that crispness to myself. It's really not a crispness issue as so much as it is a contrast issue. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to create what's called an adjustment layer. And the adjustment layer is going to allow me to bump up the contrast on just me, okay? The adjustment layers, and let me move my little face. The adjustment layers are up here in the adjustment layer palette. It should be right above your layers palette. If you don't see it there, you can always go to Window and you can turn on adjustments and it'll show up. And I'm going to choose the levels adjustment layer here. Feel free to play with all of them. The best way to learn how to do something is through playing. And just, remember, you're not going to break it, as long as you don't throw your computer across the room. And you can always, with these layers, you can always throw them away if they don't turn out. So right now, this adjustment layer, as it stands, would affect the entire image, and I want it to only affect the layer that I'm in. To do that, I'm going to hold down the Option key, or if you're on a PC, the Alt key, and it gives me this little arrow pointing down situation, and then I click. And now that adjustment layer is only affecting the layer that I'm in. So to bump up the contrast, what I need to do is I need to bring the shadows and the highlights closer. So this arrow affects my shadows. So you can take it to the extreme so you can really see what's happening. But we only need to make subtle adjustments here. That's looking pretty good. And something else that I'm noticing is that I am more saturated than the background. So my skin is really pink, and if I were wearing more colorful clothes, they would also be a little bit more punchy, I guess. So I'm going to create yet another adjustment layer. I'm going to go to this hue and saturation, and I'm going to do the same thing there. I'm going to hold down the Option key or the Alt key to get that arrow pointing down. And I'm going to, if I desaturate it all the way, then I'm black and white. Well, we don't want that. Still want some color. But taking out some of that saturation helps to bring these two images closer together. Another nice thing about these adjustment layers is that you can turn the eyeball on and off, the visibility. So this is with that desaturation, and this is without the desaturation. And you can see it's a subtle difference, but it really makes a difference. I also noticed that there's a little piece of grass here that I need to address. And again, that's just going to be my eraser tool. And I'm going to come back into that layer 1 where I am existing. And I'm just going to clean up that little bit. I went a little far there, but I don't think it's a big deal. You know, if you accidentally like, oh, whoops, I lopped off my thumb, you can always go to edit and step backwards. And to be honest, I think this is fairly convincing. I might want to do a little bit more touching up. I would definitely recommend at this point, I would save it, I would walk away, I would come back to it in a few hours and look at it again and say, is that convincing? Or have someone else look at it. Remember that I've only put one person in. You are going to put 2 people in. You're going to put yourself and a classmate out of that shared drive. One more thing that I want to show you, because whenever we're working with images of ourselves, we become critical of our own appearance, right? Well, I'm self-conscious of these little red dots. I don't know what they are. I've had them forever and ever. They're, you know, probably some kind of birthmark. But, and you don't have to do this, but if you're seeing something and you're like, oh my gosh, I just really want to get rid of that, there's a nice quick tool. And this is something that you're going to end up using for your selfies in the future. It's the rubber stamp tool, or the clone stamp tool. And what it does is it takes pixels from one area of a photograph and plops them down on another part. So basically I'm copying and pasting on a much smaller scale. You may want to adjust your brush size. And I'm going to go with a nice soft, I'm going to go with a 0% hardness just so that it blends in. And in order to suck up those pixels, I have to hold down the Option key or the Alt key and click in a blemish-free area. And then I move it over the red spot and I click. And you see how the cursor showed up over there? Well, it's sucking up those pixels from nearby and plopping them down. And I'm going to get all of them. But notice how I didn't leave my cursor, the source cursor, in the same spot. I came really close to each one of those little red spots. And that way it's really matching well. There are several other ways of doing this, and there are several ways of doing this that are even more automated. This is how I do it. If you come across a more automated and easier, or a more intuitive to you way of doing it, then please, by all means, go ahead. Totally fine. From here, I would start putting in my second person. I don't have a second person yet because there aren't any images in the source materials folder. So you may be at this point. And I want to make sure that I save it as a Photoshop document. So I'm going to call this class, vacay. We're going to call it 1, just in case I go back in and make another version. Make sure I know where it's going. I'm going to go ahead and put it into Art in the Computer. And I guess I'm going to make a new folder called Class Vacay. And I'm going to save it as a Photoshop document. And then I'm going to also save it as a JPEG, because remember that you can't upload a Photoshop document into Moodle. It needs to be a JPEG, all right? But you don't need to save it as a JPEG until you're totally done. But when you are totally done, save it as a JPEG. Remember, you want the maximum quality and baseline standard. That is it for now. I do have a part 2 of this demo, which is on how to include shadows. But I think that I like to break it down into 2 parts because this allows you to get started, and you don't know if you need shadows or not yet. But then next week you might be like, oh yeah, I need some shadows. I'm recording this on October 7th. We have just been put under mandatory evacuation. For those of you who are in Lake Charles, don't worry about getting started on this. I'm going to be evacuating. I'm sure you will be too. If you're not in Lake Charles and you're just like ready to get started, go for it. And that's why I made this video, is so that those of you who are able to or are, just like you're just ready to get started on the next thing, now you have the information to get started. But I'm gonna extend the deadline on this project just because I'm not sure where everybody is, and I think it's more important to focus on our safety and our well-being. But if while you're evacuated in a hotel somewhere and they have Wi-Fi, this will give you something to do and have fun with it. So far, Paris is winning, although there is a vote for Cleveland. And that voting closes tonight at midnight. Again, I might extend that just because, at this point you may be, running to the grocery store or to the gas station or whatever and doing your hurricane prep. So hang in there, stay safe. And as always, email me with any questions or concerns that you have, okay? All right, I hope to see photographs of you soon, and I hope that you have fun with this, and I will see you next week. Look forward to some announcements from me. Okay, all right, see ya.